Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Daski, and on behalf of JTC, I will be your webinar host. Today's webinar is held in conjunction with MND's Urban Sustainability e-Symposia 2021. The theme for this month is sustainability, as Singapore aims to achieve long-term net zero carbon emission, peaking emission levels by 2030 and halving it by 2050. Our webinar today is entitled Green Transformation of Industries, a tripartite partnership. This tripartite partnership is envisioned as a close collaboration between the government, industry, and academia, working hand in hand towards greening Singapore's industrial landscape. Now, this transformation is no small feat. JTC and the whole of government cannot do it alone. Hence, this partnership is paramount to move the needle in our sustainability goals. We have a very interesting program lined up for you today with distinguished speakers from the government and private sector. Firstly, JTC's Group Director and Chief Environmental Officer, Mr. Kelvin Chung, will be sharing about catalyzing industrial transformation for sustainability, the greenDIP. Secondly, Acting Director of A-Star Simtech, Dr. Jonathan Loh, will be presenting a feasible approach for measuring sustainability with life cycle assessment and life cycle costing. Thirdly, Director of Glaxo Wellcome Manufacturing, a company under the GSK family, Mr. Chai Bu Chun, will be delivering his presentation titled Journey Towards Sustainable Manufacturing in GSK Singapore. And lastly, CEO of Alpha Biofuels and Comcrop, Mr. Allan Lim, will share his take on an SME sustainability journey with his presentation titled Transforming for Clean Energy and Sustainable Singapore. After the four presentations, we will be having a Q&A segment moderated by Executive Director of Singapore Green Building Council, Ms. Yvonne So, and we will be going through some of your questions with the speakers. You may post your questions and comments throughout the course of the webinar using the Q&A function located at the bottom of the screen, and we look forward to answering them later. On behalf of JTC and the 20 co-organizing ministries and agencies under the Urban Sustainability R&D Congress, we welcome your active participation, suggestions, and sharing. First, I would like to invite Mr. Kelvin Chung from JTC Corporation. JTC is responsible for the development of industrial infrastructure to support and catalyze the growth of new industries and transform existing enterprises in Singapore. Mr. Chung oversees engineering design for the development of JTC's industrial building and infrastructure works, and also leads the team that drives R&D in the built environment, digitalization, and sustainability. Without further ado, Mr. Chung, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us in the symposium today. My name is Kelvin. I'm from JTC, and I'm an engineer by training. And currently, one of my roles in JTC is to lead the sustainability effort. JTC has been seriously looking into sustainability since about 2 years ago, and a lot of our efforts are mainly revolve around things that are directly under JTC's control. For example, in our new development as well as in the operation of our assets and buildings and estates. So moving forward, we foresee that the next frontier for us is how do we tackle the carbon emission from the industries. And that leads me to the topic that I would like to be sharing today, which is about how do we catalyze the industrial transformation for companies and industries in Singapore towards sustainability. Okay, without further ado, let me load my first slide. So let me start by talking about our national challenges and sustainability targets. I'm sure a lot of you are already familiar with it. Singapore is no stranger to constraints. Firstly, we have our we have a land constraint, and we also have a lack of natural resources, and that includes the most vital one, which is water. And we also have a very small population, and therefore it's constrained in terms of human resources. And moving forward, we think that carbon will be our next constraint, and it will probably be a constraint that will come sooner than rather than later. As you all know, Singapore has committed to the Paris Agreement, and our emission will likely peak in 2030 with a peak of about 65 million tons. And with that, our commitment is to halve our emissions by 2050 by half. So that will means that we will need to reduce our carbon emission by more than 30 million tons a year. This is by no means an easy task, but nonetheless, we already started and we have a long runway towards the goal of 2050. So if you look at the efforts that we have started over the last 1 to about 3 years, we have introduced the carbon tax. We started small with $5, and we are likely to review this in 2023 and likely to increase the carbon tax. And also more recently in 2019, we have announced our solar target to 2 gigawatt peak, and that accounts for about maybe 3% of our total annual electricity consumption. So in the next slide, as you can see over here, Singapore has also recently announced our Singapore Green Plan. This is a comprehensive green plan that involves not only the whole of government, but also all our whole population. And the green plan is basically has 5 focus areas. If you look at the bottom table below the green plan of these 5 pillars, you can see that JTC has already started quite a number of these initiatives. And it's by no means a coincidence, but all the initiatives that we have started on actually supports all the various 5 pillars. And as I said earlier, many of these initiatives are JTC focused, but we are starting to put more focus towards trying to bring our customer industries together in this journey. And moving forward in the next phase of our sustainability initiative, we think that working with our customer will likely be the prime focus. Okay, so for the next section, I would like to talk about a little bit about what JTC has done over the years. And let me first start with our vision. We are not doing this because we are tree huggers, and we are not doing this only because we want to save the world. We are doing this actually for a clear purpose. And the clear purpose is not only about achieving our national target, it's also about preparing our economy for the future. And what that means is that we want to prepare our company and businesses to be future ready, as we think that the green initiatives, or rather sustainability, will become a key focus area for business survivability in the near future. At the same time, we want to build our internal capability on sustainability, and hopefully we can create new business opportunities along the way. What we did was to make sure that we include sustainability in all our business consideration and use it as a core principle and key pillar in our business. Not businesses, but rather the business of JTC. So JTC has also started reviewing our longer-term targets for sustainability. We are actually at the final stage of our review, and we'll be disclosing our sustainability targets in the longer term, probably with 2030 as a target date in the coming months. So with this target, what we want to focus on is basically the whole life cycle of our industries, not only from the development of our estates, which we term this as development carbon, to the operation of our estates, which is how we operate the estates in terms of electricity and water consumption, for example. And lastly, how our companies are producing emissions on their own through their industry processes. We hope to use carbon as a common denominator to determine what is the contribution and targets for all these 3 part of the life cycle. So we are not ready to share the targets at the moment, but as I said earlier, we will be announcing these targets in the coming months, or if not weeks. So I'm sure a lot of you heard about our solar program. So about 2 years ago, we started on this solar journey. And as a start, what we were trying to achieve is to use up all our available spaces, not only in terms of roof, but also land that are temporarily vacant, to use it to generate electricity using solar panels. But we realized that we do not want to just lease out the land for solar, but rather we want to work with the solar vendors to see how we can bring in new and innovative technology to improve the solar generation and also the solar reliability. So I just give two examples of how we do this. Firstly, with Terranus Energy, we work with them to see how we can integrate other forms of renewables into the solar farm. And with that, you can see the picture below is actually the solar lamp farm that Terranus has put on our Jurong Island. And with that, we are using the sea space in front of it to test bed other forms of renewables, for example, from wind and for currents, to supplement and complement the solar energy generated. The other example is with Sembcorp, where we are trying to work with them to see how we can also harvest rainwater from the below the panels and use the water for other more meaningful purposes. So our solar program basically aims to help to supplement and contribute to the national target of the 2 gigawatt peak. The spaces from JTC alone can contribute about 100 megawatt peak. But we realize that to go further, we need to work with our customers and the industries and the companies. And to do so, we started to offer our solar contracts to also our customers. And with that, we are very happy and heartened to hear that many of our customers has taken on the offer and agree to put on solar on their rooftop. And all in all, we think that at the moment, the contribution from our customers alone will already exceed the 100 megawatt peak that JTC can contribute towards the 2 gigawatt national target. So the other area that we work on is on the Jurong Island Renewables Open Call, which we co-call together with EMA. So in this grant call, what we hope to achieve is not only to generate solar power for Jurong Island, but at the same time to test out the integration of solar with energy storage system. The second area that we want to focus on is whether we can create a smart grid on Jurong Island, something that will improve the resilience of the power network in Jurong Island, and hopefully shape the peak consumption from the national grid. And the third focus area will be on testing other innovative new technology on renewables and low carbon technologies that generate low carbon, that will lower the carbon emission on Jurong Island. So you all might also have know about this Jurong Island Circular Economy Study. Maybe before I start to explain about this Circular Economy Study, I would like to first say that actually Jurong Island is a very unique industrial park. It was first conceived in such a way that we link companies together, where one company's products can be used by the other company as their raw material. And to be very frank, at the early stage of when we plan out Jurong Island, the purpose is to reduce business costs. As you can imagine, if the one company's products can be sent to the company just beside it, we will drastically reduce the logistic and handling costs of these materials. And actually, if you look at it from today's context, this is also a very sustainable way of planning industrial park. But to be honest, we probably did not have sustainability in mind, but rather business costs in mind when we first conceived this Jurong Island more than 20 to 30 years ago. So even with the opportunities being present in Jurong Island today, where a lot of companies' operations are intertwined, we think that there are still more opportunities that perhaps we can create. And with that, we started on this Jurong Island Circular Economy Study. And in this study, what we hope to achieve is to gather information of material flow for all the major companies in Jurong Island. And from there, identify areas where we can further optimize and also close the waste loop in Jurong Island. I'm very heartened to say that a lot of the major companies, in fact, most of the major companies on Jurong Island have taken part in this circular economy study. And as a result of this study, which we have already concluded, the prelim report has already been concluded, we are embarking on 4 possible mitigations and new business opportunities. So all these are frankly very long-term projects, but we are working towards this target together with the companies on Jurong Island. Other than that, we have also done quite a bit of work to add greenery and biodiversity to our estates. You can see over here, we have started a lot of tree planting exercises in our industrial estates. And we are not talking about just planting the trees along the roadside, which is mandatory for all development in Singapore. But rather, we are talking about adding more trees beyond those that are already required. And all in all, JTC plans to plant about 100,000 trees by 2030, in addition to what is already available, or rather already planted in our estates. And we don't do this alone. We hope to garner support for all the companies in those estates, not only in terms of money, but also in terms of manpower to plant all these trees together. With this, we hope to create more awareness and at the same time allow the companies and their employees to feel that they own the estates and want to do something to the estate to promote sustainability. If you can see the last picture on the bottom left, this is the Coral Reef Garden at Sisters Island. So for this project, we advertised about this project and we are very, very heartened that actually a lot of companies volunteer to donate money as well as provide their resources to help us in this project. And all in all, I believe we have gotten almost about $500,000 of donation for companies to help in this reef garden project. Okay, so for this section, I'm going to focus about how do we tackle the emission and for our company's processes. And with that, let me just first share what are some of the challenges that I foresee in doing so. Firstly, many of the industrial processes use a lot of energy, and rightfully so, because what the companies are doing is basically incurring the energy to produce goods and services for the masses. So naturally, they consume more energy, and a lot of time, many of these companies have really optimized the process such that they improve the efficiency up to a pretty high level. And to move to the next level, it will not be easy, and we have to find good ways to do it, and at the same time, ways that are economically viable. And to make things even more complex, many of the company processes are proprietary and the data are not really available. And at the same time, even if we had the data, there's a lack of expertise on sustainability in companies' processes, and this will probably take time to build up. The next difficulty is that the industry landscape is very broad, and many processes are almost totally entirely different. And because of that, sustainability initiatives and methods and even technologies, the application on the various industry will not be universal. And a lot of time, each industry will probably have and require a tailor-made suite of technology to help them improve their sustainability. And there's now, we think that moving forward, there will be a high demand for this group of experts and expertise. The last challenge is that there's no universal standard for sustainability, especially when it comes to industry application. There are many, many different standards around the world, as well as audit methods and certification. And many a time, when companies start to look at sustainability, they will be a bit confused which one to choose from and which one to start with. So with all these challenges, what we're trying to do now is to have this program which we call greenDIP, and DIP stand for DIP stand for Decarbonizing Industry Project. And what our aim is to help our customer in this decarbonization journey. And how do we help so? To do so, we want to create a set of tools for them to assess their operation. And we will be industry specific and target specific industries. And for a start, because there are too many industries to start with, we will be focusing on those industries that has a higher impact in terms of sustainability. And as well as the same time, businesses that are not too overly affected by the ongoing pandemic. We will be engaging our customer on this and hopefully encourage many of our customers to come on board. And our initial target is to get 20% of our customers to come on board in the various sectors that are being identified. We hope that the tools that we create for this greenDIP will be able to provide a very systematic way of accounting for the company's carbon, and especially so for the companies that first started on this journey, so that they know exactly what to do, how they are contributing to the carbon emission reduction, and at the same time, where are the help where they can seek. To dissect the whole greenDIP into action items, we are working on two main work streams. The first is to work with A-Star and to come out with these assessment tools. And we cover the whole life cycle part of the company's operation, not only from their office operation, but to their building and construction, and more importantly, to their production. And at the same time, a lot of these green initiatives will require money, not only in terms of capex, but sometimes also increased cost of production. And with that, we are trying to work with the various agencies, banking institutions, to see how we can create support and incentive to help promote this, the adoption of this recommendation from TUSU and A-Star. So let me elaborate a little bit more about the incentives that we can provide. We break them into three different baskets. The first one is about how do we aggregate some of the already some of the incentive schemes that are already available and provided by the various agencies. I'm sure you all know that there are already many schemes available, but it would be good for us to whether we can aggregate them together and make it clearer to our companies which they can tag on. And hopefully through our assessment tools, we will provide them with a green lane status or pre-approved status to apply for when they apply for these incentives. The second part is on green lease. From here, we will JDC as a landlord, we want to consolidate the kind of the list of sustainability initiatives that we think are already achievable and economically viable, and include them in our lease requirements. And hopefully through this, the companies will know exactly what they can do and how they can contribute towards sustainability. And we will build this upfront into the lease agreement such that it will be priced into the rental. Okay, the third basket is on green financing. And here we try to work with MAS and some of the banks to see whether we can provide green fund with a preferential interest rate to help fund and support our customers' sustainability initiatives. And hopefully they can use our greenDIP or Green Compass as a basis to improve the accessibility of these green loans to the companies. So this is my last slide. We think that in order for us to embark on this sustainability journey, especially to improve the sustainability in our industry, we need to work with multiple parties. It involves not only the government, where we provide the framework and support for the companies. It also involves the IHLs, and IHLs in a way that they will translate some of the research into application, at the same time fill up the knowledge gap and comes up with new innovation to help in promoting sustainability in the vast industry landscape. And with that, I'm very glad that our next speaker, Mr. Jonathan Low from A-Star, will be talking more about this. The other party that we will with is obviously our companies. And with that, we basically have two groups. One is the MNCs and one are the local companies. In a lot of the MNCs, they are already very well established in sustainability. They have a head start in this, especially those from those European companies. I hope that this company can serve as leaders and role models to help the whole industry transformation. And with that, we have this Mr. Chai Boon Chu from Glasgow Wellcome Manufacturing, who can share some of how their companies have taken the lead on sustainability. The last is our local companies, and we hope that a lot of our local companies can start embarking on this sustainability journey. This is because we think that the need for sustainability will come, and the consumer will be asking for it. And the earlier our companies start to pivot, the higher chance that we will be able to survive and thrive in this new global environment, business environment. And with that, we have the fourth speaker, Mr. Allan Lim from Concord, who will speak about his journey, his company's journey on sustainability. And without further ado, I would like to pass my time to the host to prepare for the next presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chung, for sharing with us about JTC's new sustainability initiative, the greenDIP. It is very interesting to learn about how JTC partners with the industry to drive various sustainability initiatives. We encourage you to participate in the greenDIP and to tap on the support schemes to help your company both economically and sustainably. Each of us has a role to play in this transformation to reduce Singapore's industrial carbon footprint, and JTC is prepared to support the industry in your sustainability journey. If you have questions about the presentation, we encourage you to post them in the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. Next, we have Dr. Jonathan Loh to deliver his presentation on measuring sustainability with life cycle assessment and life cycle costing. At A-STAR's Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technology, SIMTech, Dr. Loh is responsible for charting the research direction in the areas of life cycle assessment and life cycle costing for techno-environmental economic analysis, data science applications in the domains of decarbonization and circular economy, and innovation of low carbon and circular production technologies. He is also active internationally through his role as the chairperson of the Technical Committee of Environmental Management and also represents Singapore in the ISO for Circular Economy. Dr. Jonathan, please.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm Jonathan from A-STAR Singapore Institute of Manufacturing Technology, or SIMTech in short. So thank you for joining me today. I suppose this topic about sustainability and going green is very, very trendy at the moment. And there's a lot of noises coming out about companies going green, what are the efforts that they have put into place to actually be part of this transformation. But how do we know that people are actually working on the right initiatives? How do we know that what is deemed to be green is truly green or environmentally sustainable? So just give me a moment to share my slides now. I think we see in the papers or in the media, like what I mentioned earlier, companies are, say for example, using paper bags rather than plastic bags, and people are talking about banning the use of plastics entirely. And even our Prime Minister quite recently also got into this conversation when this viral video about how the plastic straw was stuck in the turtle's nose, and everyone was going, let's ban plastic straws, and then people started replacing the straws with metal straws, biodegradable straws. But are they truly better? So interestingly, a study was done by the Danish Environmental Protection Agency back in 2018, and they used the life cycle assessment approach to assess whether the reusable options as compared to the single-use plastic bag, were they truly better? So in terms of the reusable polypropylene bag or the PP bag, what they found was you need to use them at least 37 times in order to be better than the single-use plastic bag. And when you look at paper bags, you need to use them up to 43 times. So can our paper bags even last that long? We start to ask this question, right? And for those of us who have the cotton bags, we better make sure we are using them up to 7,100 times before we throw them away. Now, as you can see here, going sustainable or going green is not as straightforward as it seems. And the concept that we need to have here is about life cycle thinking. Because without life cycle thinking, what may seem like an easy solution could actually shift, or in a worst case, create new problems for the environment. So what we do at A-STAR SIMTech, we have been doing a lot of R&D in the area of life cycle assessment as well as life cycle costing. So you can actually view life cycle assessment, or LCA, as an evidence-based approach to measuring what is sustainable. So if you have a product, you have the services, or even looking at an entire ecosystem, you could apply LCA as a tool to measure the environmental performance of your product, services, and systems. And in tandem, you can apply life cycle costing to provide the economic dimensions to this. So for example, if you are going green, obviously you need to put in some financial investments. So would they be the most cost-effective initiatives that you want to put in place to go green? And if you look at life cycle assessment and life cycle costing, fundamentally, they are broken down into 4 steps. So the first step, which is actually the most important step, is about framing the study. So in this step, what we call goal and scope definition, we need to understand the purpose of this measurement. What are we going to measure this sustainability for? Who are we going to communicate the results to? And potentially, it's not just about measurement. Eventually, you want to use the data, the information to improve your product, services, or systems. So what are the questions that you need to answer? And with this as a frame, you go into the next step, what we call life cycle inventory analysis, where you start building up the models and collect the data about what are the resources that you use, you consume in order to provide the product services to your customers in the end. And with that, we move on to the next step, which is life cycle impact assessment. This is where all the data that you put into the model now gets calculated or computed into so-called KPIs. So one of the more popular KPI here could be, like, for example, carbon footprint. What is the carbon footprint of the products and services you're providing? And in terms of life cycle costing, you could even measure them in the common financial indicators like net present value, what is the internal rate of return, or what is the return that you need to overcome a certain hurdle rate in order to make an investment. And of course, things like ROI and payback period. And finally, with that is, KPIs are just KPIs. What is the meaning behind these KPIs, right? Then in step 4, this is where we interpret. So if you say you have an X amount of carbon footprint, is that high, is that low? And in this stage, we actually put the context around what these KPIs actually mean. And through certain techniques, you could even look at potentially where are the hotspots in your system that you need to focus on in improving, as well as what are the potential intervention measures you could put in place to improve the sustainability. Now, maybe some of you may be thinking, okay, I haven't done life cycle assessment, but I've been adopting this GHG protocol standards. It could be the corporate standard, it could be the product standard, it could be even the scope 3 standard, right? I would say, fantastic, this is a great start. In fact, it's not any different from what life cycle assessment is about, because in fact, these GHG protocol standards are based off life cycle assessment. And if you look at life cycle assessment, it encompasses all that is covered under the GHG protocol standards. And if you know how to apply life cycle assessment in a more holistic way, it can even do beyond that. For example, covering things like avoided impact, which tells you what could be the consequences of some of the decisions you make when you're improving sustainability. Are you shifting problems or even creating new problems, or what we call rebound effects eventually? Now, in the following slides, I'll be going through some of the case studies that we have done, working together with our various stakeholders, including industry, industry and the public sectors, right? So in this particular case study, we work with Alpha Biofuels, whom is going to give a separate presentation later. So this was one of the first life cycle assessment project we have done. This was way back in 2008 when they were still a startup. incubating at one of the incubators in an ITE. And the question was during that time, is biodiesel that is derived from the used cooking oil collected around Singapore actually environmentally better than the fossil fuel-based diesel? Is there a scientific evidence behind whether how much better in terms of the environmental sustainability this biodiesel is, right? So here we employed life cycle assessment, and what we found was, yes, it's indeed better, and in fact is significantly better. So across the board of the various life cycle emissions, we found that, for example, the carbon footprint could be 180 times less if you use biodiesel as compared to the fossil fuel-based diesel. And in the following project here, we worked with Ramatech. So if you're familiar with the Together Pack that we received last year, the mask, the reusable mask that you get, we were asking the question, okay, everyone is saying that single-use disposable mask is creating a lot of waste, but is the reusable mask indeed better? And what we found was, yes, if you use the reusable mask over a 30-day period, because you can use it up to 30 times, and in fact, potentially even more. If you look at a 30-day period, you're looking at 3.3 times less carbon footprint, as well as 5 times less amount of waste. And in fact, if you wear it over 8 days, you would have been already breaking even. So if after 8 days, you are already better off than wearing the single-use disposable mask. And after 6 days, you would have already generated less waste. And in terms of the absolute amount of carbon footprint that you are avoiding, potentially, the assumption here is 1/3 of the Singapore population goes back to work. Collectively, we could avoid 590 tons of CO2 equivalent. And in terms of waste, we potentially could avoid 220 tons over a 30-day period. And some of you may be wondering, are you sure a small mass like this could actually generate so much amount of waste? Well, the thing about life cycle assessment is we don't just consider the mass itself when we dispose of it. But when you look at the entire life cycle of mass, when you manufacture the mask, they are actually cut out from large sheets of materials. And in the manufacturing process, you actually generate a lot of the manufacturing waste that you don't see. So life cycle assessment actually provides this holistic view of the environmental footprint of the product that you are consuming. And in this next project here, we actually work with our sister institute, the Institute of Chemical and Engineering Sciences, where they have a technology for carbon mineralization. So maybe some of you have heard of carbon capture, utilization, and storage. So this is one technology where you are able to deploy and capture the carbon emissions from, say, your power plants or your incinerators and convert it into sand, which can be used by the building and construction sector. So now then we are asking, okay, in doing this, do we truly get a net negative in terms of carbon emissions, right? Meaning, when we do this, we have to generate carbon emissions, but do we get a net positive carbon abatement in the end, right? So if you look at the chart on the top left, we were able to break it down into the individual steps within the whole supply chain of doing carbon mineralization. And you can see that in the bars that is on the positive axis, these are the processes that actually emits carbon and carbon emissions, while the bars on the negative side actually shows the amount of carbon that could be captured and avoided. And what we found was taking into account a baseline configuration of this supply chain where we actually import this mineral from Australia to do the carbon mineralization, we were still able to achieve a net abatement of almost 116 kg CO2 equivalent in the end. And through life cycle assessment, we were able to zoom in some of the hotspots. For example, transportation contributed almost 50% of the total life cycle carbon emissions, as well as the thermal activation. And so when we went ahead to do a what-if scenario analysis, we found that if we were to import this mineral feedstock from our neighbors, rather than importing all the way from Australia, and as well as recovering some of the industrial waste heat to be used in the thermal activation, we could improve the carbon abatement potential by up to almost 9 times. So up to over 900 kg CO2 equivalent per ton of CO2 sequestered or captured in the end. In a similar project, but now focusing on food, we also worked with Temasek to look at what is the environmental of the food that we consume in Singapore. And we see a lot of reports that are coming out from the US, from Europe, about how beef or the animal agriculture is the biggest culprit, right? So when we did a LCA, yes, it is pretty consistent with what is coming out from the West. So beef on a per kilo basis is the biggest culprit. But when we layer this with the consumption patterns in Singapore, we start to realize that actually the hotspot is pork, because we are consuming pork in a higher amount than beef, right? And if you now look at what we did in terms of what if scenario analysis, the chart on the top right, we also wanted to ask this question: what would happen when we move towards our 30 by 30 goal, where we produce 30% of our nutritional needs locally by 2030? And what you see from the red line is if we do nothing at all, due to population growth, the absolute amount of carbon emission is going to increase, obviously. But if we go 30 by 30, we will see a reduction in this absolute carbon emissions, largely due to the avoidance of the transportation of more than 90% of the food that we are importing right now. And what we found that really moved the needle was when we nudge people to eat more plant-based meat rather than animal-based meat. And just by substituting 50% of our red meat with plant-based meat, like Impossible or the Beyond Meat, right? We were able to see a reduction from the business as usual up to 26%. And in terms of the absolute amount, even from the year 2018, we were able to see an absolute reduction of about 600,000 tons of CO2 equivalent. So I've been talking a lot about the environmental dimension of things, more the life cycle assessment. But like what I mentioned, life cycle costing, when done in tandem, can provide the economic dimension to support the decision making. So this particular project here was done to investigate what is the economic potential of enabling circularity for consumer electronics. In this case, it was the flat panel display monitors. So this was done way back in 2014, before the whole extended producer responsibility, or EPR, was introduced in Singapore. And during then we asked this question: what is going to be the economic impact of doing this in Singapore? And what we found was, if we were going to enable this closed loop recycling or circularity for this flat panel display monitors, overall it's going to be cost incurring, but still cheap enough to be able to generate profit for the company that is doing that. But when we use the life cycle costing to zoom into the more granular details, we were able to zoom into this LCD panel, and we found that this was the most cost-incurring activity because of the mercury in the backlights used. So during that time, LED monitors were more recently introduced into the market, so they weren't the dominant flat panel display monitors type that is available in the market. And a lot of the LCD monitors then use this mercury backlights. And to treat them at the end of life, there's a lot of special treatment processes, and it's very manual laborious to handle. And this actually creates a lot of additional costs to the companies that would want to pursue this circularity. But what we also foresee that with the transition towards more LED-based flat panel displays, the cost will be driven down over time. Okay, so after sharing with you the projects, probably you'll be wondering, how do I get started on this sustainability journey? So this is the premise behind this work on Green Compass, where we are collaborating with JTC and Tusut to develop a framework to help guide companies through this sustainability journey. And this framework aims to provide easy to use tools along the journey for companies to assess where they are at, set targets on where they need to go in terms of sustainability, plan what are the intervention or mitigation measures they can put in place to improve their sustainability, and how do they implement this as a long-term continuous improvement process. And if you look at this slide over here, you will realize the boxed out part in red is the life cycle assessment and life cycle costing. And this is where tools such as this will be introduced to guide companies along this journey. All right, and finally, this is a summary of what I have discussed today. So just a recap, without life cycle thinking, what may seem like a solution for sustainability could potentially shift the problem, and in the worst case scenario, create new problems, right? And life cycle assessment and life cycle costing, hopefully through some of the projects that I've shared, shows you how life cycle thinking as a concept can be incorporated in this whole sustainability journey, in helping our stakeholders measure sustainability in a more data-driven, in a more evidence-based way. And when applied systematically in frameworks such as the Green Compass, we hope that they can support collective and decisive action towards this journey of a green transformation. That's it for my sharing today. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Loh, for the in-depth sharing on life cycle assessment, life cycle costing, and the Green Compass. It was interesting to learn about the life cycle assessment of using biofuel, reusable mass, and even our food consumption patterns in Singapore. The combined approach of using life cycle assessment and life cycle costing, such as the Green Compass, helps us make better decisions in order to minimize our environmental footprint. Next, we have Mr. Chai Bu Choon to deliver his presentation titled Journey Towards Sustainable Manufacturing in GSK Singapore. In Singapore, GSK began their sustainability journey in 2003 with an energy conservation program and progressed over the years to have a comprehensive sustainability strategy, allowing them to be the future ready and attain GSK's sustainability goals. Mr. Chai is the Director of Value Stream with more than 20 years experience in active pharmaceutical ingredient manufacturing in GSK Singapore facilities. He is also the sponsor of the Safe Well Committee, which consists of volunteers who promote and engage with employees to embed the culture of sustainability and environmental conservation in GSK Jurong. Without further ado, Mr. Chai, please.
I would like to thank JTC for giving GSK Singapore the opportunity to share our journey towards sustainable manufacturing. I will share GSK commitment in environmental sustainability, the approach we use in energy conservation, and the step changing the carbon footprint through innovation. To start off with my presentation, I would like to share a 2-minute introduction video.
In Singapore, we are a key player in the thriving biomedical industry, with investments of over $1.5 billion. Our world-class manufacturing capabilities span 3 locations. Jurong, which focuses on new product introduction and process innovation. Quality Road, GSK's key production site for amoxicillin. And Tuas, which supports the manufacturing of pediatric vaccines. Together, these 3 manufacturing sites enable the supply of innovative medicines that improve the lives of millions worldwide.
GSK made the decision to harness enzymatic technology to replace the chemical production of amoxicillin. This switch to enzymatic production will enable the facility to maintain high standards of product quality, with the added benefit of reducing cost, significantly lowering the impact on the environment, and meeting the growing demand for antibiotics in emerging markets. Over at Jurong, the first industrial continuous manufacturing facility was commissioned in 2016 to replace batch processing for a key respiratory API, marking a major milestone in GSK's journey to revolutionize the future of API manufacturing. GSK committed $30 million to a $50 million GSK EDB endowment fund to support research into sustainable manufacture and environmental management. To date, the fund has awarded over $30 million to 47 projects, benefiting around 140 researchers and students.
I will be covering the sustainability initiative for Jurong and Corridor Road site, as these 2 sites manufacture the active pharmaceutical ingredient, we call it API, for pharmaceutical products which contribute to carbon footprint through the organic synthesis process. So for the Jurong site, it is a leading API site supplying new innovative medicines to the world. The site has a strong focus on innovative and sustainable manufacturing, leverage on advanced manufacturing technologies, greener processes to produce high-quality products more efficiently. Since 2016, we operate commercial continuous processing facility using hybrid continuous batch synthesis, a first of its kind within GSK network. Over at the Quality Road site, it is a Singapore first pharmaceutical manufacturing plant started up in 1972. It is one of the world's largest amoxicillin facilities and also a global supplier of API for several of GSK antibiotics. In 2016, we opened a new facility harnessing enzymatic technology. This is to enhance the site antibiotic manufacturing capabilities and also more sustainable process having minimum environmental impact. GSK is one of the first pharmaceutical company to set ambitious environmental target in 2010. We are committed to reduce carbon emission, water, and waste. Our new environmental sustainability goal for 2030 is to have a net zero impact on climate and net positive impact on nature. At corporate level, over the past 10 years, we have achieved significant improvement in carbon emission, water consumption, and waste. At Jurong and Corridor Road, our journey started almost 20 years ago. We have delivered more than 50% reduction in energy consumption, with the initial year focusing on energy conservation. The achievement also received numerous recognition locally at the corporate level, as well as from abroad. There's always a question on how sustainable manufacturing impact on the company bottom line. To me, sustainability manufacturing is in fact the factory of the future, and it can work hand in hand to conserve the environment and at the same time deliver business benefits. Example, improve efficiency, lower energy consumption, and hence lower the operating cost. You'll find out more in my presentation later. Our sustainability journey started in 2003, with the early years focusing on the energy conservation programs. We have implemented a broad spectrum of projects to reduce the electricity consumption. Over the years, we have successfully completed more than 300 projects in energy conservation and contributed to the carbon footprint reduction. I will also share the approach we use in GSK. Firstly, energy consumption monitoring and target setting. This will help to track and detect any issues, identify opportunities and priorities areas for improvement. Next is the equipment efficiency. Instead of having huge capital investment to phase out inefficient equipment, we have the end-of-life asset renewal strategy and prioritize based on the age of the equipment and energy efficiency. Next is the waste avoidance. Minimize wastage. This will include, example, process equipment, utilities, ACMV, lighting. With the fully automated process in GSK Singapore facilities, we are able to stop the pump or shut off cooling heating systems when it is not in use. Minimize energy losses. Example, compressed air leak installation repair. Next is the renewable energy source. We embark on the renewable energy, for example, the solar panel way back in 2006, in which GSK had the largest installation in Singapore at the time. The approach I shared above, in fact, can be applied for any industry, wherever it is relevant to you. The energy conservation program are delivering improvement in the carbon footprint. It is still very important to minimize waste as much as possible, but it is still not sufficient to meet the ambitious environment targets. In 2010, we have established our sustainability strategy, focusing on innovative technology for a step change transformation in sustainable manufacturing. It transforms how the manufacturing process is carried out. Example, continuous manufacturing, biosynthesis instead of the conventional batch organic synthesis process. Next, I would like to share a video to illustrate the concept of factory of the future in sustainable manufacturing.
GSK's sustainability strategy. A blueprint which introduces green chemistry, the reuse and recovery of water and solvent, plus efficient waste treatment and disposal system. GSK's Factory of the Future is a factory not only of tomorrow, but for tomorrow. It is an icon of GSK's commitment to a clean and sustainable future that we can all share. So how does a future factory work? Firstly, with the solvent recovery project, solvents are recovered from processed waste stream and reused in the process to reduce waste. In the waste heat recovery project, diesel and electricity are eliminated to generate both heat and cooling services. The journey from waste to efficient output starts in the waste heat boiler, where incinerated factory waste at about 900 degrees Celsius generates steam used as heating services. The cool exhaust flue gas from the boiler is cleaned of dust particles before it exits the chimney. The excess steam helps generate chilled water at 7 degrees Celsius that is used for process cooling and air conditioning.
In our sustainability strategy, the top priority is to reduce carbon footprint by eliminate or reduce the use of solvent in the process. And it is followed by reuse, recycle, recover of energy, and before the disposal. So for eliminate and reduce, we apply the innovative technology, example, continuous manufacturing, biosynthesis processing, example, enzymatic process, and also greener chemistry. With this will result in the reduced solvent, water, and waste. For those not familiar with pharmaceutical processing, in the early days, all APIs were manufactured using a batch manufacturing process. API manufacturing process contribute to carbon footprint through the organic synthesis route. Solvents, which is chemicals used in processes or plant decontamination, electricity consumption to power the equipment and provide cooling, burning of fossil fuels for steam generation, disposal of hazardous waste. As technology advances, we establish a new type of manufacturing process, the use of innovative technology to reduce carbon footprint, reduce and recycle of solvents, and recover of heat. In 2016, we introduced the continuous manufacturing for one of our key products. On top of delivering significant reduction in carbon footprint, 52% reduction, water usage reduced by 95%, and solvent usage reduced by 75%. This innovation also delivers business benefits like it is giving us a better product quality. It will also enable production to take place in a continuous flow with no interruption, faster and more responsive continuous process, lower inventory with more than 80% reduction in the working capital, and as well as a production floor space will be reduced by 90%. Whereas for the biosynthesis process, significant reduction in solvent usage. This will not only saving in cost, and we are also not subject to price fluctuation or any supply disruption. Just to put things into context, the CO2 emission reduction of about 25%, it is equivalent to taking about more than 7,000 cars off the road. The waste reduction will be amount to more than 20,000 rubbish bins. The elimination and reduce is achieved by continuous manufacturing and biosynthesis process. If we move down the priority targets, next will be reuse, recycle, and recover of energy. In this case, for the reuse and recycle, increasing the mass efficiency is through the solvent recovery, and which will also reduce the hazardous waste. And also the reduce and recover of energy is using the waste heat recovery system that we have. From the video, it is showing how the factory of the future look like. I will illustrate a typical API manufacturing and how we can tap on technology to reduce carbon footprint and deliver business benefits. Our approach is exploring greener process and technology in which solvent usage will be reduced. The solvent waste generated will be incinerated. Diesel will be used to provide the heating services. Likewise, electricity will be consumed to run the facilities, equipment, and provide cooling services. Next, I will share about the benefits of this sustainable manufacturing. Solvent recovery. This will help to reduce the fresh solvent usage. This will reduce the cost for fresh solvent and also reduce the cost for the disposal. On top of reducing the carbon footprint and cost, less reliant on fresh solvent supply also helps to mitigate the risk of supply chain disruption as a solvent supply from as far as Europe or the US. For the solvent that cannot be recovered, it will be incinerated and the heat will be recovered. The recovered heat will be used for the heating and hence reduce the diesel usage. The excess steam will be used to power the absorption chiller and generate chill water for cooling purpose and hence reduce in the electricity usage. With the greener chemistry and innovation in the new sustainable manufacturing process, solvent recovery and waste heat recovery, it will also help to reduce operating costs. So I've covered the approach, how we continuously looking out for opportunity for energy conservation, the benefits of innovative technology, as well as our commitment in sustainability. GSK has long-standing partnership with various government agencies like JTC, NEA, A-STAR, PUB, EDB, and others. For example, the EDB GSK Trust Fund is sponsoring research in green and sustainable manufacturing. To be a sustainable manufacturer, we need a more holistic approach in minimizing the impact to climate and environment. This will include engagement with the employees, outreach to the community on the culture of sustainability and environmental conservation. Other areas include eliminating the use of single-use plastics, working with our partners like our supplier of raw materials. In GSK Singapore, we have Safe Well Committee, which consists of volunteers who promote, engage with employees, in championing the various initiatives. For example, we have eliminated the usage of single-use plastic in our cafeteria or pantry. We also work with suppliers to switch from plastic drum to paper carton that can be recycled. And that also helped to improve operational, as we can have carton that hold up to 200 kg of input material versus a plastic drum of handling about 20 kg of input materials. We will also have the Meatless Monday campaign to encourage less consumption of meat, as meat has significant higher carbon footprint as compared to other food. For outreach to community, we are organizing industrial visit for secondary JC students, internship for River Valley High School to provide awareness of the pharmaceutical operations, as well as to promote the sustainability efforts to conserve the environment. To date, there are more than 700 students benefited from the industrial visits and about 60 secondary school students for the internship. On the other hand, in GSK, every year, employees are given an Orange Day, in which we can choose to do voluntary work to give back to society, support and partnering with relevant organizations to promote our social responsibility. One example is Several Committee organizes various events like cleaning the beaches, cleaning the Kallang River, reservoir, lakes, or removal of the invasive species like polar bean. This photo was taken before the circuit breaker, but due to COVID, we need to pause the activity for now. To conclude my presentation, to be successful in achieving sustainable manufacturing, the few key points as follow: company commitment to environmental sustainability goal, partnership with government agencies, employee engagement, outreach to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chai, for your sharing. It is interesting to see a multinational corporation's journey, perspective, and sustainability strategy over the years. GSK's multi-pronged approach to eliminate, reduce, reuse, recycle, and recover energy inspires companies to optimize their manufacturing process. Starting a sustainability journey early can also help your bottom line by implementing actions at the right time, such as the end-of-life asset renewal program. Once again, you may post and like questions in the Q&A tab below. Next, we have Mr. Allan Lim from Alpha Biofuel and Comcrop. As CEO of these two companies, Mr. Lim is no stranger to JTC, and we have worked together to deliver urban farming initiatives in JTC's Woodlands estate. Mr. Lim will be sharing his experience on urban farming in spaces that might otherwise be underutilized to generate local produce for Singapore in order to meet our goal of producing 30% of our food by 2030. Mr. Lim, please.
Hi, I'm Allan Lim. I am the chairman and founder of Comcrop, a high-tech urban farm in Singapore. And I'm also the founder and CEO of Alpha Biofuels, a company that produces biodiesel from waste cooking oil in Singapore. Happy to be here, and today I am happy to share with you the journey that I had as an SME owner in the last 10 years. About transforming the agriculture scene in Singapore from a community-based farm to a high production farm on the rooftop of a JTC building. Today, let me share with you a little bit more about Comcrop's journey and how we ended up today at a rooftop on a JTC flatter factory, and with that producing tons of vegetables for Singapore. Now, Comcrop's journey started in 2011 as an idea to bring communities closer, right? At that time, there wasn't really about the whole idea of food security by growing food in Singapore. We were very much looking at how a simple urban edible garden can bring communities together. This was the headline in 1st of January, New Year 2011. This was 10 years ago. With me was Kenny A, past president of Kranji Countryside Association, and my partner in the very, very beginning of the genesis of ComCrop. In April 2011, we managed to build a small edible garden right at Petir Road with the support of Mayor Teo Ho Pin and Dr. Jane Goodall, world-renowned naturalist and conservationist. And over the period of 1-2 years, we garnered many young people who would come on the weekends, spend their time to do gardening with the senior citizens there. And that gave us a lot of hope and faith that the future of Singapore in agriculture is starting to trend upwards. We had not intended for this community farm to go any further at that time. However, when we started to look at the whole bigger picture of food security, we realized that the community with marginalized spaces could become an important way of growing food for Singapore. So over that 1-2 years, we engaged a total of about 1,000 youth volunteers, and we built up quite a big plot of area. At that time, really unheard of. A very open concept. Community engagement was the key, and that was something that we used as a fundamental model in building a sustainable community farm model in the future. After about 2 years of developing that and running that, we actually approached MND to look into how we could scale those small community farms into larger farms using marginalized land, for example, rooftop, and also looking at it from the point of view of increasing production, because we now know in 2012, we sort of know that it is important to not just bring community together, but also to grow in the scale up manner. That means providing enough food for our community as well. So the idea then came to having ComCrop become a high-tech urban farm that grow crops that feed community, and also engage Singaporeans with a meaningful career in the up-and-coming agriculture industry. MND gave us a small piece of land right in the middle of Orchard Road. At the background there is the Red Pass at Newton, a Scotch Road area. And then we test-bedded aquaponics system together with a group of young students from the Singapore Poly. Again, we employ the same business concept of having community members join us, senior citizens, and co-working and co-developing solutions that fits urban space. And thereafter, we spoke with MND, who facilitated us making use of a piece of rooftop right in the middle of Orchard Road. It's called Scape. And using that rooftop, which you can see here where the fireworks goes off, to actually synergize the very first rooftop farm in Singapore. So this was what the farm looked like, or the rooftop looked like on day one when we took over. It was really just a bare patch of ground. And this was the middle of construction where we self-designed a system of hydroponics and aquaponics combined. And we moved them up to the roof to begin piloting the trial. Over the period of 2 years, we grew different type of crops. Some did better than others, but we piloted and trialed different growing systems to arrive at what is possibly a useful and space efficient system. Again, we connected with communities. By this time around, we have more students coming in, and they started to innovate and take on projects on their own. And you can see here, many of these participants are young and people who really think that there could be a possibility of having a career in agriculture in the future. After 2 years of operating in Scape with a 500 square feet space, we felt confident enough that there is a way to build up large-scale production facilities using marginalized land. And this is where we approached JTC, who then pointed us to a sort of a flatted factory building that has potential for large-scale commercial growing. And we were at that time targeting to grow 23 tons of vegetable over the entire roof per month. So this is 15 Woodlands Loop. So the building right in the center of this picture is about 180 meters long and about 60 meters wide. So that actually is where Comcrop is today. And Comcrop has built the first of its greenhouses as a test pilot, and we have run it successfully for 3 years. We are producing thousands of packets of vegetables on a daily basis that is supplied to the various supermarkets and online. And during the Malaysian NCO last year, during the early stages of COVID-19, this first greenhouse played an important part, along with other local farms, that to shore up the supply of fresh vegetable, which is a highly perishable product that cannot be frozen. And we shot up using the capacities of our farm into the supermarkets for a few days where there is a surge in the consumption patterns. We actually did a small rebranding of our farm, and we have a Chinese name called Maofeng Nong Chang, and we actually dig deeper into our mission, and we realized that it is a lot more important while we keep to our previous missions, but to build the feeling of our community into the psyche and the DNA of our farm and our workers. So this is Woodlands Greenhouse 1 at the very beginning of build up. You can see it's quite a big greenhouse spanning 8,000 square feet, which is about 10 times bigger than what Scape was. And it's fully climate controlled. This is the greenhouse on day 1, just before we started growing. This was the founding team at Greenhouse 1. Next to me, in the person in blue shirt, is our CEO, who runs the day-to-day of our company. And then we have the team that started with us, which actually came out from Scape. And we have soldiered on in the last 3 years and have gone from a small little test pilot to what you can see today, growing green lettuces, red lettuces, basil, chai steam, and supplying that out. So this was a long journey for us. For myself, it's 10 years, but the route from Scape to Woodlands took 4 years, 8 agencies, clearances, because there were no precedents and no agri ecosystem in Singapore. On the right, you will actually see a picture of a packet of vegetables coming right up from our farm, and the background is the newspaper of 1st of January 2019. So what lessons have we learned in the last 10 years? I think the most important lesson that we have learned is that innovation comes in many, many different forms. We started innovation as a community garden, and we have since become an industrialized, full control ecosystem of growing. The second lesson that we learned is that engagement of the young people and old people and different sectors of our community is very, very important. It is because of those engagement that we are able to fine-tune our business model. And the last important lesson that we learned is to be relevant to our industry, making use of resources efficiently and to engage our stakeholders in a very honest manner, helped a lot in the way we craft our way forward and how we design our business model, from the growing recipes, the type of vegetable to grow, all the way to our supply chain and how we add value to each of these chain to make sure that the best produce goes to the market. I've come to the end of my presentation and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lim, for the presentation. It is heartening to see ComCrop tackling the social, environmental, and economic aspect of a business from the onset. I hope Mr. Lim's down-to-earth story will inspire SMEs and startup owners in our audience to transform their business model to incorporate sustainable and environmentally friendly measures. Our final program for today will be the Q&A panel discussion with our 4 guest speakers. I would like to invite our moderator, Ms. Yvonne So, Executive Director of Singapore Green Building Council, and our returning speakers, Mr. Kelvin Chung, Dr. Jonathan Loh, Mr. Chai Bu Choon, and Mr. Allan Lim back online. Once again, we welcome all the questions that you have through the Q&A function, and do like questions that are more relevant to you. Speakers, do turn on your videos for the panel discussion. Over to you, Yvonne.
Thank you, Starsky, for the introduction, and a very good afternoon to everyone. I was very inspired by our speakers earlier on and found it really refreshing to hear about the topic of industrial sustainability from different angles. So my goal for this segment today is that whatever your role may be in the industry, you will come away at the end of this webinar with some new ideas, fresh perspectives, or perhaps a new strategy for your company or research project. And especially for the companies joining us today, I hope that it will encourage you to take the first steps or perhaps more advanced steps towards sustainability in your corporate objectives and outcomes. A key message that has come across clearly from the presentations that we have heard is that there's definitely no one-size-fits-all approach for the industrial sector. And I must commend JDC for taking a multi-pronged approach in supporting the sector. So this is what we'll be doing in the next half hour. I will kick off the conversation with our wonderfully diverse panel by asking some questions to draw out their unique perspectives. And then after that, I will get our speakers to address some of the questions that you all have been posting to the Q&A chat box. So let's begin and let's find out more about what is holding back the industrial sector in Singapore today and how can companies take the first steps towards sustainability. Let me begin with our first speaker, Kelvin from JDC. So Kelvin, JDC has a bird's eye view of the industrial landscape in Singapore and interacts very regularly with companies from large MNCs to small new startups. What do you see as the biggest challenge today in pursuing industrial sustainability? Over to you, Kelvin.
Hi, Yvonne. Thanks for the question. I must emphasize again that in the industry scene, it's actually a very, very varied and very diverse scene. Not only from the perspective of commitment and also understanding of sustainability within the industry, but also the industry by itself is a very big word. It comprises many different companies with very varied manufacturing processes, and there's no one-size-fits-all kind of technology that can help. So I think that's the starting point of my what I'm going to say. And as an economic agency, we do understand how businesses are worried about sustainability. And I think the major challenge is how do they balance sustainability with profit and growth. To be very frank, today, many of the sustainability initiatives are still seen as a cost item that will only draw benefit perhaps later down the road. And some of them, well, the benefits could be almost guaranteed. It's still somewhere down the road. And there are also initiatives whereby the benefits may not be guaranteed at the moment. So it's a fine line to draw. And I would say that this will be one of the biggest challenges that we know of. And then the second point the second challenges that I see is that because the manufacturing process are so varied, the technologies that can be applied is also very varied. And it will be quite difficult for many companies to actually know what they can do, or even how do they compare with the best in class in the business, because these are commercial and a lot of the companies who are very good in this sustainability area might not be readily sharing the information. And then lastly, I would think that at this trying time of the pandemic, to a certain extent, I think COVID also presents certain challenges for sustainability for the industry, partly from the point that many of us are distracted to try to cope with the situation and the changes that we need to cope with every day due to the restriction that we have to be imposed on ourselves to contain the pandemic. So, but I'm quite confident that because of the pandemic, we now have a bigger focus by the industry on sustainability, and hopefully this can help to accelerate the journey later on. Thank you. Over back to you.
Okay, thanks, Kelvin. Let me see if our other speakers can corroborate your views. So maybe I turn to Chai. Chai, GSK Singapore is the regional headquarters for emerging markets and Asia-Pacific pharmaceutical and consumer healthcare businesses. You have three global manufacturing and supply facilities in Singapore, and GSK is one of the biggest contributors to Singapore's biomedical sciences industry. So what were some of GSK's biggest challenges in your sustainability journey, and how did you overcome it?
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. So as I shared earlier in my presentation, so our journey in fact started like 20 years ago. So as you know, that API manufacture is very energy intensive. It also consumes substantial amount of solvent, or we call it chemicals. So to reduce the carbon footprint, we have a significant improvement. So in fact, we need to really transform the way we manufacture API. Also, that will need to involve a lot of research, design, and also using the innovative technology as well to change the way we manufacture our process. I think if look at the challenges we face, for example, if we want to change the process we make, especially for existing processes, so that we will incur huge amount of time and effort as well. So which include the thing I mentioned before, the design, development, capital investment. I think you need to revalidate the processes. I think the other thing is also there's a long regulatory approval lead time. I think as some of you may be aware, the pharma industry is a highly regulated industry. So with a lot of specific details of the process being registered with the regulatory agencies. I think for GSK Singapore sites, like we are the global supply sites, and we supply to many markets. It could be 50 to 100 countries. So for any changes we make in the process, which can be a major change, they will need a significant amount of effort and time to get approval from the authority. It can be from months or to maybe years to get approval. So to be successful to have this innovation technology, we must be early in terms of this investment in order to maximize the benefits on these carbon footprint reductions. So to do that, in fact, it's a lot of commitment from company. So which means we need to have a very early investment in terms of this innovative technology, and sometimes in the new product introduction as well. I think, for example, is we have even have a new product launch using the continuous processing as well for one of our new products. So I think the challenge is still how we weigh the benefits between the sustainability versus the return on the investment as well. So I think for moving forward, I think there are other areas that we look at, because it's a continuous journey. Because to achieve the goal like GSK set to be net zero impact on the climate by 2030, so there are more things we need to do. So we still need to explore many areas like the renewable energy. But then the challenge for us is in Singapore, there are not many options now to have the renewable energy as compared to our sister sites in the UK, for example. We have the luxury of space to install things like a wind turbine. Yeah, so but for us is we only have is like solar panel. Yeah, so which is a viable option for us. But we consume. I mean, for the solar panel, I think in Singapore side, I think you know that our site is very compact. Yeah, in Singapore, so we do not have that much of surface area to have to harness the solar energy as well. The amount of energy that can harness probably maybe only account for a fraction of our consumption. So in fact, it's still a long journey. I think the focus for us is to see how can we reduce as much as possible and also eliminate the use of the solvents or reduction of energy consumption. That is our first priority. Yeah, Yvonne.
Yep, thanks, Chai. So maybe now I turn to the opposite spectrum of the industrial space size-wise. So I will look to Allan. Allan, you are I would say a serial sustainability entrepreneur. In addition to ComCrop, you also founded Alpha Biofuels. So you've shared with us the hard lessons learned trying to get ComCrop off the ground. But can you also share with us from the angle of a small-ish local company, as well as a solution provider interacting with many small industrials in Singapore, what are the biggest challenges in pursuing industrial sustainability from that perspective?
Thank you. I think if we look at the journey that we have gone through the last 10 years as a small media enterprise, my biggest takeaway is my fellow entrepreneurs and startup bosses has a very steep learning curve to understand what sustainability is. Now, we tend to think of sustainability as energy efficiency, wastage, conversion to solar and all. But what does it really mean to SME when you are developing products or you are providing services to another company? Our journey started with developing a product, and then 10 years ago, finding out what that biofuels life cycle CO2 is. At a point where nobody actually talked about it. But today, during the COVID period, we saw our business went 50% up. The revenue went 50% up. Because despite the restrictions and the crisis at hand, sustainability became the forefront. And we were able to justify in accurate terms the amount of CO2 tied to the fuel that we produce to the customer, which gave us a competitive edge over many other alternatives. And so when we think about this and how it relates to the SMEs, the future of the competition is not how cheap or how good we can do. Those are very important. How efficient we can be, what's the quality of our product. But what is the net carbon that is tied to this product will be a key criteria if we wish to export our products and services, right? If we wish to develop market. So to me, the challenges is our Alpha's challenges and our ComCrop challenges is one. But as an industry as a whole, with all the SMEs coming on board, and it's really important for them to start to learn what this is all about. From a 2-man printing shop to a 500-man SME in precision industry, everyone needs to start to learn what this is about and how to weave the CO2 or LCA into their products and services. You don't have to do 100% of it, but for the key clients you are serving, which is starting to demand for more sustainable service and product, those would set Singapore SMEs apart from the region.
Thanks, Allan. So that was a really good point about taking a more learned approach, right, to developing your solutions. So that brings me actually to Jonathan. I was very intrigued by your presentation, which really drew home the point that in creating a new solution or solving problems, a deliberate and scientific approach should be taken to ensure that we don't end up creating new problems. So is it common for companies in Singapore to adopt life cycle thinking to address sustainability challenges?
Yeah, thanks Yvonne for that question. So maybe if you ask me this question, say 10 years ago, I would say very little companies, especially locally, are doing it. But I think right now, I think the game has changed, right? I think this COVID situation, besides making things really uncomfortable and not convenient for everybody, it started creating some awareness, right? What are the kind of disruptions we are seeing? People start talking about supply chain resilience. You know how everyone were rushing to the supermarkets and clearing out the shelves, and how vulnerable and susceptible our local supply chain is to this disruption. Actually, this for me is a taste of what could happen if we don't mitigate climate change, right? I think a lot of people are starting to gain awareness about this even bigger impact that we can see if we don't do something right now. And also, I think from the perspective of consumers, I think as compared to last time, right, people are becoming more savvy. So we talk about greenwashing and companies saying, oh, you know, their products are green, but actually they're not. Right now, consumers actually start asking the question, where is your evidence? Are you telling me the truth? I mean, in these times of fake news, alternative facts, right? People are starting to ask questions behind this kind of claims. So yes, I'm happy to say that I'm starting to see things changing in a more positive light. Yeah. Over to you, Yvonne. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think now I will select some questions from the Q&A box and pose them to our speakers, but there's really quite a lot. So please forgive me if I don't pick your question. So perhaps I start from the broad overview first for JDC, since Kelvin, you were the first speaker. So maybe Kelvin, can you share with us how is JDC tackling the carbon release impact of construction as part of your business? I think this is the general question about, you know, what's how you're dealing with the carbon impact of construction.
Thanks, Yvonne. So actually, when it comes to construction, it's about building. So actually, there are two parts to it. So you have the operational carbon where you operate the building, and then there's the embodied carbon, which which is the carbon emission resulting from the construction of the building itself. So for the latter, I think we are, as a Singapore, we have been embarking on the green mark. So I'll not talk much about that. I think we have achieved quite a bit. Now on the topic of the embodied, this topic is quite interesting. After factoring operating carbon for so many years, I think it's time that we start to have some focus on embodied carbon. But by no means, it's not an easy task. And I think one of the biggest challenges with embodied carbon is actually on there's actually not enough data that can form the baseline for certain building typology, especially for industrial buildings. As I shared earlier, industries, they are very varied in their processes and how they use the building, including how their buildings are being constructed. For example, just giving you an example of the difference between industrial building and, say, for example, residential or commercial building. Industrial building usually have big spaces with columns that are wide apart, and yet the loadings are much higher. And as a result, you can imagine that the embodied carbon in terms of the carbon from the amount of concrete and steel used are definitely bigger. But these are all, I would say, purpose-built for the particular industry. And because of that, I don't think there's a lot of data out in even the research community to help us set the baseline on embodied carbon. And without a baseline, it's really very difficult to even know where we are in terms of when we construct our building. And where do we stand and how do we set targets moving forward. So with that, we are very interested to find out, and we have really started the work with both some of the universities, NUS and NTU, to try to figure this out, to accumulate preliminary data and actually form a good baseline for that. And once we have that data, we will then inject it into the design and the construction of our buildings, and hopefully we can help to bring down the embodied carbon of for different buildings from various industries. So we are definitely started on this. Of course, the lower hanging fruit is about switching to greener concretes and cements, and of course steel for nearer country. For this part, we will have to. We already started the discussion on that internally, so likely we'll roll this out pretty soon. But that being said, I just have to caution that sustainability have to be taken on balance with other consideration, for example, resilience and also cost. But that being said, we already started the journey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jonathan, not to put you on the spot, right? But do you have any quick advice for Kelvin?
Yeah, I think just want to add to what Kelvin mentioned, right, about the operational carbon. I think in the past, a lot of focus has been put on operational carbon, but we start to see very forward-looking companies in the building and construction space are starting to see that as they try to optimize the operational carbon, they reach a point where they have already achieved the best efficiency they can get in terms of energy, which is a major contributor to carbon emissions. And now they start to see the shift. The lion's share is now shifted to the embodied carbon, right? So I think for embodied carbon, in the case of our buildings, some of the initiatives that people are thinking about is in the design, in the architecture of the building, can you use less materials? Can you substitute your current construction materials with the greener alternatives? And of course, when I say greener, hopefully you have some data and evidence behind what you say is greener. And with that, these two initiatives, I think, despite the challenges, there would be opportunities to further reduce not just the operational carbon now, in fact, including the embodied carbon emissions, what we call the total life cycle emission of the building. Over to you, Yvonne.
Okay. Kelvin, back to you again, because there's a question about whether JDC is developing any new standard for sustainability. And if that's the case, whether it's actually possible to just have just one standard for the whole industry, since, you know, like you mentioned in your presentation, the industry is quite varied.
Yeah, Yvonne, I think we definitely need to have a certain way of measuring the sustainability efforts and also the contribution of the individual industry. But yet, I don't think it's possible to come up with a standard. I think we, for that, because we are basically just starting on this journey, we will try to lean on something simpler, perhaps to convert some of the initiatives, the impact of the initiatives into a certain metric in terms of energy, water, and also carbon emission, and then use that as a way to measure. I don't think we should go into a. I don't think we should create standard out of this whole thing. To us, it's about having some. Okay, maybe I have to rephrase my answer again. What I'm trying to say is that as the industry is very varied, while we create standards, we need to create various standards for various industries. At the end of the day, from our perspective, as part of the government, we are actually looking at the contribution for each industry, and there must be, at the end of the day, a way for us to collate and compare across the industry. And because of that, we try to keep it simple. And I don't think one standard can meet it all. Maybe perhaps I can invite our partner where we are trying to develop this green compass with A-Star Jonathan, Dr. Jonathan, to maybe help me answer this part.
Yeah, I'll jump right in here. I think just to summarize what Kelvin is saying here is, I don't think there are a lot of available standards already. I don't think there's a need to develop more standards. Probably what we are looking at as part of Green Compass is to develop some kind of framework that is fit for purpose, taking into consideration the needs of our stakeholders, and trying to design something that is relevant, as well as being aware that we shouldn't aim for perfection. We just want to get something that is good enough at this stage so that we can lower the barrier of adoption for the end users. I think that is the approach we are taking.
Okay, just to follow up on that, right, there's a related question about whether there are other environmental impacts apart from, carbon greenhouse gas emissions. So could you comment on that?
Yeah, so yeah, I saw this question, one of the questions being asked, right? Besides carbon footprint, actually, there are other kind of environmental impact indicators that can be considered. So yes, in the case studies that I showed, if you notice in the slides at the bottom of it, of the slides, right, there are actually references to the published technical papers. And within those papers, we actually covered a whole suite of life cycle impact indicators other than carbon footprint. So things like water depletion, we covered waste as well, depending on the relevance. And we even cover things like eco-toxicity, if it's relevant to the study, right? So yes, in fact, there are other environmental impact indicators beyond carbon footprint that we need to be aware of. And sometimes these indicators actually create certain trade-offs that you need to be aware of. As you optimize, say, for carbon emissions, potentially you will be creating, again, this is the other aspect of problem shifting. You could be shifting a problem to another environmental impact category.
Okay. On the same subject of LCA, but maybe now I turn to Allan, because I think you work together with Alpha Biofuels also in their product development journey. So Allan, there's this question also about which step of the life cycle does biodiesel save on compared to diesel, and then what's the reason for this saving? Would you be able to answer that question? And yeah, posed by one of our participants.
The most important thing I will talk today is, the very first life cycle analysis that was done with Jonathan. That was,
so I guessed it right.
10 years ago, right? That was the very first one that Simplex did as well. We actually didn't know what we were doing. I think, at least as a startup company, when Simplex said, hey, can you do life cycle? We thought it was a good thing to do. We never realized the benefit until 10 years later. And I'm not saying that it is such a long span, right? It's because we invested way ahead. And as the time came, the tide rises and we are in the right tide. And then we are sailing today. To your question, right? I think we cannot capture every data from our experience. We couldn't capture every data in the life cycle analysis at that time 10 years ago. We just did something about life cycle about marine fuel a couple of weeks back. And the same problem, we cannot capture every single data yet. And so where do we draw the line? And I think the key is we draw the line at what is logical and sensible at the current moment. So if you say that what is the most key part about it, is it the tailpipe emission? So many people tend to confuse the entire life cycle CO2, which is from well to wheel, or in our case, from the kitchen to the engine, to the wheel. It means we collect used cooking oil and make the biodiesel. To what the tailpipe emission is, which is the CO2, right? I have some SME Tauke kind of tell me, hey, actually, if I use EV, I don't have the tailpipe emission, then I sustainable already, what? So this is where, when I talk about challenges, right, we need to learn quickly what are the basic concepts, what are the basic principles, and to also understand that no matter, despite our best efforts, right, the picture will not be complete. We will not be able to calculate to the minute 3 decimal place CO2. But what is very useful is when you go head on with an MNC client like Glaxo, and you are able to prove with proper authentication what is the net CO2 to this energy that they will be receiving. It sets you way, way apart from the other people who has a solution, but will probably not be able to justify without a life cycle analysis. So I hope that sort of answered the question, but yeah.
Okay, thank you, Allan. So maybe we move from all these technical data to financial information. Chai, there's this question about what is the minimum expected ROI for sustainability initiatives. I don't know if something like this can be computed, but maybe GSK has done some internal computations on this. Maybe you can share with us.
I think as I shared earlier in my presentation, so for the project that we do, so especially when you adopt the innovative technology, they do give us a lot of benefits as well. For example, improving efficiency, the product quality, also sometimes can reduce operating costs. But some of the investment, like I think things like the solar panel investment, the payback period can be longer than our expected return. So if I'm not wrong, so I think we started the journey, I think like 15 years ago to install the solar panel. I think the payback is more than 10 years. Yeah, so I think it's, even though it's 10 years, I think it's still something we should do because we're still paying back. And also, so the important thing is this is really help to reduce the carbon footprint. Yeah, so this is our goal, this is our aim to safeguard the environment. So of course, also if you can have both, meaning is you still improve your efficiency and have a good return, that's ideal. But to achieve that, I think we need to go beyond whatever we normally do, not just doing the recycle, reuse. We should try to eliminate and also try to reduce, and also adopting the new technology that we have been pursuing in the recent years as well. Yeah, Yvonne.
Yeah, so maybe if I can also ask you to answer this other question. I know that GSK, you started on your sustainability journey like 2010. It's like a good 11 years ago. So I think you are most qualified to answer this question about, what are the other ways to incentivize the private sector? Because I'm not going to put Kelvin on the spot to, ask, what financial incentives there are. So maybe for corporates, what else other than financial incentives motivate companies to move?
True. So as I mentioned, it's not all investment that does have a very good financial return. So I think it's important. It's a commitment of the company. So I think for most companies also they understand that to have the sustainable manufacture, it's also critical to ensure the future ready, and that will have the economic competitiveness as well in the future. And I think important thing is also this help to build the reputation of the company. I think just an example is, as I showed in my video, the GSK EDP Trust Fund, that we have, that is to sponsor the green and sustainable manufacturing. In fact, for this so-called investment, in fact, there's no return for GSK. So in that fund that we collaborate with EDP is to sponsor the research for this green chemistry and for the green manufacturing. This is for the greater good of the overall industry. So in fact, this is like a commitment for the society and for the environment. And of course, this is not really look out for the financial return in this aspect. I think for longer term, I think it's consumers or the younger generation. The addition is the company reputation is important as well. So to be a responsible corporate citizens is something we need to do our part to make sure that our operation will have minimum impact to the environment. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe I will post one last question and I will direct that to Allan on this whole subject about social benefits and also, considering the financial investment. There's this question about, for, I think specifically, rooftop farming, but I guess small business in general, to get such a business off the ground, should you be thinking about the financial investment? And do we need to have external funding for SME to succeed? And what's your advice for a startup SME in terms of getting ready financial wise? And then I think with that, I think it will be a good round off to today's session.
Okay, so I started answering some of these questions by typing them through. So a shout out to Prof. Lok, my tutor in the past. Thanks for coming and asking really cool questions. We spend a lot of money. We really do. As something that's breaking new ground, making biofuels out of used cooking oil, growing vegetables on the rooftop. The capital investment is not sensible because it's today cheaper to buy vegetables from Cameron Highland than to grow it ourselves. But just like Elon Musk trying to go to Mars, there is a sense of mission and purpose to what we are doing. And it's not for a near-term gain, it's not about ROI. It's about what Singapore would want to be, and how do we continue to prevail. And my team of people firmly believe in that. And we believe that at the end of the day, if we can break through the current situation of developing, maximizing production or making our products more accessible, then the returns are manifold. So if you were to look at it, yes, you definitely need investment. Now, the bigger question is government willing to help? I think help will be given to those who deserve it. This one is Harry Potter, right? But it is true, right? In the very beginning days where we had nothing, we couldn't get help, even from the government. But it was through sheer investment, making logical sense, test piloting, test baiting, developing prototypes, testing prototype, getting academias and institute like Syntech involved, that gave us a lot more confidence that, and then with those confidence, we developed a product that is useful. And when that became the reality, help came forward, and I think we're quite grateful for some of this help from various agencies, especially JTC, who took a look at a small little farm and then they said, okay, why don't you do it at JTC 50 Woodlands Lupis? And today we run the biggest rooftop farm in Southeast Asia. So help will be given, but I think the runway is long. We have to, this is not a sprint. This is sustainable business is a long marathon, and the winner may not be very obvious. It may not be the most shiny or the guy with the lowest sustainable, lowest carbon footprint, but it's the one that can consistently build up products and build up trust and continuously be relevant to what the global market is. I hope that answers the question.
Well, thank you very much. That was a really nice ending for our session today, on that very strong partnership note and, Singapore together message. So thank you, panelists, for joining me today. And it was really, really insightful hearing from all of you. I will now hand the time back over to our MC, Starsky. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Yvonne, and our panelists for the very engaging discussion. On behalf of everyone, I would also like to express our appreciation to the guest speakers and moderator for taking time off their busy schedules to be with us today. Coming to the end of the webinar, we hope that you have found today's sustainability-themed webinar insightful and productive. If you would like to have follow-on discussions or get connected with our speakers, do write in to our secretariat email address as seen on our EDMs, and we will help to link you up. Before we end the program, I would like to make a couple of announcements. Coming up in June, we will be having a series of 6 exciting webinars, which are organized in partnership with the World Cities Summit and the Singapore International Water Week. They will cover a range of topics, including complexity science, social resilience, and the pertinent issue of sea level rise. You can register for these webinars via the QR codes as shown. More information will also be sent out in our upcoming EDMs. We are also happy to share that the Urban Sustainability R&D portal has been launched. Through the portal, you can view the lineup of upcoming webinars, read about our RIE 2025 plans, and also explore various innovation support opportunities. You can access the portal via the QR code as shown, and more information will be shared through our EDMs, which will be sent to you. You can also refer to the slides that will be shown at the end of the webinar. With that, we have come to the end of today's webinar. I would like to thank all our attendees for your active participation. We are glad to see many of you here with us today, and we hope to build a community that supports one another in this sustainability journey. It's been a pleasure being your host, and have a great evening ahead. Bye.